Right now, as you watch this, a Category 5 equivalent storm is tearing across the Pacific Ocean, and it's heading directly for American soil. 200,000 American citizens live in its path. Military installations that are critical to U.S. national security site in the strike zone. The islands are already preparing for impact, as expected, in less than 48 hours. But here's what's strange. Almost nobody is talking about it. Super Typhoon Sinlaku. This is what it is, this is why it matters, and this is what it tells us about the future of extreme weather and who gets left behind when it arrives. Let's start with the storm itself. Sinlaku is what meteorologists classify as a super typhoon, the Western Pacific equivalent of a Category 4 or Category 5 hurricane. We're talking sustained winds that can exceed 150 miles per hour, with gusts that go even higher. That's the kind of wind that doesn't just break windows. It removes buildings from the ground entirely. And here's the terrifying part. As of right now, it's still intensifying. The warmer the ocean water, the more fuel a storm has to feed on. And the Pacific Ocean right now is running hot. Sinlaku is expected to strengthen further before it makes landfall, meaning the worst is still ahead. Now let's talk about who lives in its path. Guam and the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, the CNMI, are U.S. territories located deep in the Western Pacific, about 3,800 miles west of Hawaii. Together, roughly 200,000 people call these islands home. They are American citizens. They pay taxes, they serve in the U.S. military at disproportionately high rates. And yet, when a monster storm approaches their shores, the national conversation barely flickers. These islands have a brutal relationship with typhoons. They sit directly in what's called Typhoon Alley, one of the most storm-active corridors on the planet, and they are not well equipped to absorb another major blow. Guam's power grid, already under strain from aging infrastructure, has been devastated by past storms and has struggled with long-term outages lasting weeks, sometimes months. Critical utilities, water systems, hospitals, all of it at risk. And then there's the military dimension. Guam hosts Andersen Air Force Base and Naval Base Guam, two of the most strategically significant U.S. military installations in the entire Indo-Pacific region. Any damage to these facilities doesn't just affect 200,000 civilians. It affects American national security posture in one of the most geopolitically sensitive parts of the world. To understand why Sinlaku is this dangerous, you have to understand how it was built. Tropical cyclones, whether you call them hurricanes, typhoons, or cyclones, depends purely on where they form, all operate on the same engine, warm ocean water. When sea surface temperatures reach about 79 degrees Fahrenheit or higher, they begin evaporating enormous quantities of water vapor into the atmosphere. That vapor rises. As it rises, it cools and condenses into clouds and rain, releasing massive amounts of latent heat energy in the process. That heat warms the air further, causing it to rise faster, creating a massive updraft at the center of the storm. This draws in more warm, moist air from the surface, spinning inward due to the Earth's rotation. This is the Coriolis effect. And this cycle, once it starts, can feed itself for days, growing larger, more organized, more violent. A super typhoon like Sinlaku has essentially become a perfectly organized heat engine, a thermodynamic machine pulling energy from the ocean and releasing it as catastrophic wind, rain, and surge. Now here's where the science gets darker. The ocean temperatures Sinlaku is feeding on right now are not normal, even for a warm region. Scientists have been tracking a sustained period of anomalously high sea surface temperatures across the Pacific. Combine that with the influence of El Niño, the periodic warming of the central and eastern tropical Pacific, and you get conditions that can supercharge tropical systems faster than our models can fully predict. What this means for Sinlaku, the storm may have undergone what's called rapid intensification. That's when a tropical cyclone's sustained winds increase by at least 35 miles per hour in just 24 hours. It's one of the most dangerous phenomena in meteorology because it can transform a serious storm into a catastrophic one in a matter of hours, often before evacuations are complete, before supply supplies are delivered, before people are safe. Rapid intensification events are becoming more common. Climate scientists believe that as global ocean temperatures rise, the probability that any given tropical cyclone will rapidly intensify has increased significantly. Sinlaku is not a freak accident. It may be a preview. This isn't the first time Guam has been in a storm's crosshairs, and every time the consequences have been severe and long-lasting. Super Typhoon Mawar, which struck Guam in May 2023, was one of the strongest storms to hit the island in decades. It knocked out power to nearly the entire island. Some residents went without electricity for months. Water systems failed. Crops were destroyed. The economic and psychological toll lingered long after the storm itself had passed. And before Mawar, there was Pongsona, Paka, Omar, and dozens more over the decades. Each time, the islands rebuild. Each time, their infrastructure absorbs another blow. And each time, the question gets louder. How many times can these islands take this kind of punishment before the damage becomes truly irreversible? The concern with Sinlaku is not just its raw intensity, so that alone would be devastating. It's the cumulative effect on communities and infrastructure that never fully recovered from the last hit. A weakened power grid struck again. Undersea cables already under stress. Emergency services stretched thin. What Sinlaku could do isn't just about one storm. It's about compound disaster. Sinlaku may just be the opening act. Climate scientists and seasonal forecasters have been signaling for months that the seasons ahead could produce an abnormally active typhoon season in the western Pacific. The combination of warm sea surface temperatures, atmospheric conditions favorable for storm development, and the tail effects of recent El Niño events creates what researchers describe as a loaded gun for tropical cyclone formation. That doesn't mean every storm will be catastrophic, but it does mean the probability of encountering more storms like Sinlaku, or worse, within a single season is measurably higher than historical averages. Which brings us back to the silence. When a hurricane threatens Florida or the Gulf Coast, the national media mobilizes instantly. Governors declare emergencies days in advance. Federal resources pre-position. The national conversation shifts. There is, rightly, a sense of collective urgency. When a super typhoon threatens Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands, the response is muted. Not absent, FEMA and federal emergency structures do respond, and local officials work tirelessly to prepare. But the scale of public attention, the sense of national urgency, the feeling that this is happening to us, it's simply not the same. Why? The honest answer involves geography, visibility, and a long, complicated history of how America thinks about its territories versus its states. The people of Guam and the CNMI cannot vote in presidential elections. They don't have full voting representation in Congress. They exist in some ways in a political limbo. American enough to serve, American enough to pay taxes, but not always American enough to command the same urgency when the storm comes. That is a choice, and it's one worth examining, especially as the storms get stronger. Sinlaku is real. It is happening now. And within 48 hours, the people of Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands will know, in the most direct way possible, exactly how powerful it is. What happens next will depend on preparation, on infrastructure, on federal response, and on luck. But what happens after that? How quickly aid arrives, how long recovery takes, how much national attention these islands receive in the weeks that follow, that depends on something else entirely. It depends on whether we decide they matter. Weather doesn't pick favorites. Storms don't know the difference between a state and a territory. The ocean doesn't care about political categories, but we do. And what we do with that awareness, that's the choice in front of us. Stay with me on this one. I'll be posting updates as Sinlaku makes landfall, and in the days that follow, covering the actual impact, the federal response, and what the aftermath tells us. Subscribe so you don't miss those videos, because this story is not over. And I want to hear from you. Did you know this storm was happening? Drop a comment below, because if the answer is no, that's exactly the point of this video. I'll see you in the next one.